but I will just try to continue. So I was saying that the G20 held on the African soil for the first time is a profoundly symbolic, as it represents the turning point in the architecture of the global governance and the moment that confirms the continent re-emergence of its power, or as a shaping force in the global affairs. But also, I was saying that even the absence of the US at the summit, it carries symbolic weight as it reflects how the global table is shifting by itself without fight, and how the center of gravity is, in a global cooperation is moving. It's also at the same time the presence of major world power gathered on the African soil all together in one. For me, it marks the arrival of a new era, the Africa's era of visibility, agency, and global leadership. And more importantly, yes, there are some negatives and all that, but let's first applaud the fact that Africa has demonstrated that it is capable of influencing and even guiding the world future. But also, for me, the South African presidency embracing that responsibility of clarity by inviting the other African head of states and continental institutions. So it really affirmed, it was for me an affirmation that the G20 was not only a moment for South Africa, but it was a moment for the entire continent. So, and hosting, in absence of the US, I think somebody have said, this was really a moment that created a space, a political space for African leaders to speak into the global agenda directly, confidently, but also somehow collectively, though it might not be to the level that we would have wanted it. So for me, I think really South Africa used its presidency to reposition Africa's priorities as a global priorities. They've always been there. Like it has been said, I'm not taking away from really what everybody have said. I think they're all true and correct, but just that repositioning of the Africa's priority into the global priority as global priority, for me, that was really, really significant. But also, yes, we are talking about declarations and we are talking about commitments and so on. And we know, we are aware, and thank you to one of the speakers that said they are not binding. These commitments are not binding. However, as we can read through it as a global document, this is not just an African document. It is a global document. It bears African footprint across, transformative sectors, the industrialization and value addition, including critical minerals, infrastructure, the just energy transition, energy access, food security, agriculture, climate, digital transformation, the AI innovation, financing for development, women and youth. And I think for me, that is very, very important. So I think really the outcome demonstrated some kind of intentional leadership from President Ramaphosa, who really wanted, his theme was solidarity, equality, and sustainability. For me, if I just look at maybe from just high level, that solidarity of looking at this is Africa's moment, that was very, very important for me, just to make sure that he has brought together around him all his counterparts around the continent. It's really, it's assured me that these principles, were actually there on the table to shape the negotiations somehow. Like everyone else have alluded to, the real test begins. The post G20. This is where it starts. So Africa now is really faced with a challenge to continue to position itself the after G20 summit, because the event is gone. All the highlights, the media, it's gone. We are now face to face with our reality. And I will look at first the competitive advantage that Africa has on G20, since we're talking about G20. South Africa being a full member of G20, that is one. Number two, the African Union holding a permanent seat in G20. And we know that, yes, G20, does G20 has teeth, really? We don't know. Is it another UN? We don't know. And sorry. And I think maybe we know, but we are trying. At least this is the moment where we wanted to show our position, and I think we really did show it. So for me, that dual representation, it can actually help Africa to leverage on it strategically. So I think Africa needs to continue to champion the Ubuntu diplomacy, because this is really, like everyone have said, this is an amazing concept that is value-based, and Ms. Nyerere had just invited us to revisit those commitments of Ubuntu. So we need to continue that. This is our identity as Africans. It's a value-based approach. It emphasizes solidarity, humanity, justice, and equitable cooperation. And I think for me, that is the key. The key is that we need to look at ourselves as equal. Like Carlos says, I love your passion and just your power, Carlos. Yes, we do not expect that the West will respect us now, but we need actually to position ourselves and to consider ourselves that we are equal. If they look at us as equal, that is another point. But we first need to look at ourselves as equal, because we are bringing something to the table. So the AU permanent seat at the G20, really, it's supposed to be a continuity or institutional continuity, and also a long-term influence. Yes, already this morning we're hearing that the US will not invite South Africa, and I hear what Carlos was saying this morning. Well, why? Why they don't want Africa to sit at the table, at the global table where decisions are being made? And I think that way we need to stand ourselves. We need to believe that we are leaders, and we can actually lead the world. And we need to position ourselves as a global leader, because I think as we've been just I think everyone was talking right now, if we continue to be at the receiving end and we're still putting our hand up, give me, even the AU being funded externally, it's not on, and that's why they continue to disrespect us. We know that the AU has the Agenda 2063, and we are actually closer to 2063 that we could think in 1963 when it started. 100 years is almost around the corner. But I think as AU, and I believe that this G20 being a moment to reawaken, a moment to re-emerge. Maybe, who knows, maybe the AU will now stand up and align now the Agenda 2063 to the commitment of the world. Do we need to do that? Maybe yes, maybe no. But we're talking just from the point of view that we are part of the global agenda. We also understand that development does not happen in isolation. It always needs a concerted effort. So yes, and we do agree, and I would agree with everyone that has spoken before me that in our shelves around the continent, our shelves are full of excellent, beautiful policies, but our implementation gap continue to widen. It continued to widen. So I think this is really the moment, this is really my reflection on G20, where we are challenging now African leaders, and someone has spoken about accountability. It's really a moment that we need to have an African-driven accountability. Is it just because of G20 commitment? No, it is really overall commitment that African governments, including the AU, have given to the people of this continent. It will be time right at this moment, as someone has said, that it's really a moment of reflection. It was a moment to really realize, a realization that we are actually part of the global agenda. And I will really just kind of recommend that this commitment, number one, it requires political will. I know as they were making those declarations, there seemed to be some political will, but that will not happen unless there is an African-driven accountability where we hold our leaders accountable. So where we want to see strong leadership, we want to see corporate sector engagement, we want to see civil society. And I think that's where my heart is. Civil society, we need to arise and just hold our leaders accountable. And like everyone else have said, continental coordination. I love what someone put in the group, the Africa 54 summit. Why can't we have that? And that is the continental coordination. Furthermore, as I try to conclude, I think Africa needs to strengthen its African common position, just like Ms. Nyerere has just told us, where we need to revisit the commitments that were put by our forefathers, where we need to redefine how to consolidate these positions of global negotiations, whether we're negotiating with G20, with COP, with IMF, with World Bank, with the World Trade Organization, the UN. We need to have that African common position, and everybody, I'm just agreeing with everybody what they've said. We need to be able to speak with one voice, So I think for us, really speaking with one voice, it's both really a political necessity and geopolitical opportunity. Really, we really cannot continue. It cannot continue to be business as usual. It's really time for us to awake. Number one, if Africa can actually strengthen their common position, number one, it will enable the continent to negotiate decisively, okay, especially when it comes to protecting the natural resources that we have. And that will prevent the proxy wars, the proxy conflict that we're having on the continent, which are driven by the competition for African minerals. That will only happen when Africa stands on one common position and one voice. So as we continue to witness the war in Eastern DRC, in Sudan, in Nigeria, in everywhere else in Africa, where do you think those wars are coming? Who is equipping those rebels? Those ammunition are not coming from Africa. They're coming from somewhere. But if we as Africans, if our leaders could stand with one common position, it will enable them to really start making those decisions as one voice. Number two, the common African position will just allow Africa to strengthen its stance of democratization. We've signed up for democracy. Well, it's not me, and I don't think it's youth of today, but we've signed up for democracy. Yet in Africa, the principle of democracy are not adhered to. They're not being applied. Our democracies in Africa need to reflect the African values of Ubuntu and not compromise on the very same principles that our leaders have actually committed to. As we can see, the recent development in Cameroon, in Cote d'Ivoire, it's really raising fundamental questions about the continent accountability to democratic principles to which they have committed to. So weak governance on the continent, it can only lead to instabilities. Many coups that they are condemning in Africa, as we are witnessing up to now, even yesterday there was one, they are actually just a mere symptoms of deeper failures to uphold democratic principles. Failures that disproportionately are harming our women and youth. As we can see across Africa and Sudan, you can't open the TV without your tears flowing down your eyes when you look at what is happening. Let's get to women and youth. For me, they are central to Africa's future. Women and youth. And even as we are talking about the implementation of G20 commitment, and it's not only G20 commitment, there's so many, like one of speakers have mentioned, piles and piles of commitments, of regulations, of policies that are piling up and collecting dust. But we are now just requesting that how can we implement those? The implementation to all those commitments will not happen if women and youth are not on the table. And let's remember, when it comes to this commitment from G20 or from any global powers, remember that no one will implement them but Africans. If we don't ratify them within our different countries, if we don't implement them, nothing will happen because it's not of interest of global powers to implement them. And women and youth now become very, very important. As someone have just said, youth represent over 70% of the African population. So it's really just time. And for me, I would just call on women to unite. Women need to unite, to collaborate, to position themselves as credible partners for development. So women need to prepare, need to organize, to lead, because really when global powers or global partners come to Africa, they are increasingly looking for capable African counterparts. On youth, my call will be that they need to equip themselves with the skills that the economy will be needed. The skills that the minerals need, the technology need, the agriculture need, and all the new industries, they need to position themselves for the opportunities instead of dying to look for greener pasture in Europe or somewhere else where the doors actually are being closed. We are calling on youth. This is Africa's moment, as everyone has said. And we need to be unapologetic, as everyone has before me have said. It's really time, as I conclude, that as we structure this follow-up, and I think there's more questions than answers to all these commitments and declarations that have been put in place, as we prepare ourselves for for those commitments, we need to organize ourselves. We need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to call on their political will and unified leadership as a continent. We will not be able to achieve even the Agenda 2063 or even just implement what we are doing if, the commitments that were done during G20 and prior to G20, why they're not implemented, because we are speaking with 54 voices instead of speaking with one voice. So it's really about time that we promote that inclusion of all Africans, and our leaders need to know they are not the ones who will implement. It's actually the African people that will implement those resolutions. The African people in the land and those in diaspora. So Africa will not only re-emerge as we do that, it will not only re-emerge as a global leader, but it will become unavoidable on a global table. Even if they don't invite us, they will be needed. So thank you so much, and let's get ready as we shape the world future. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Madam Madeline and Mkunu, our Queen Mother.